the Grey Hat Beard podcast. Hello and welcome to show 39, part 2 of Grey Hat Beard, the modern workplace podcast where we talk about all things Microsoft 365. If you haven't listened to part 1, which was last week, we talked about all the latest news from Inspire with exciting things like Dynamics integration, which we predicted and it made it happen, kind of. Windows 365, so you can access your Windows anywhere. And the excitement of a new version of SharePoint, and then the crashing reality that realizing it was an on-prem version. But do go back and listen to that if you haven't, because in this part 2, we're going to be talking about how you can use Microsoft Viva to help you build habits, practices, and rituals. Now, you may be thinking, what on earth do you mean by habits, practices, and rituals? I don't know. Garry and Al, what do you mean by habits, practices, and rituals?
Oh, well,
don't jump in. I should have named one of you there, shouldn't I? Yeah.
We both have answers for that. Go for it, Garry.
Yes. So it's practices when you do something and name a single person, then suddenly decide to break that in the middle of a podcast recording and confuse everyone.
No, I think that's a habit for you. So 3 words that kind of maybe sound similar, but actually they're actually distinct in what they are. So, building habits are things that you don't have to think about, right? It's just ingrained. You just do them. You've done them over and over again. It just becomes part of your working day. You don't even think about it. So regular, repeatable things. Practices, slightly different in the fact that a practice is something that you're training for almost, right? Sports people practice all the time. Why do they do that? To improve their skills, to get better at something. Because if they're practicing on a regular basis, you're able to improve your skill level, productivity goes up. It's if you don't practice things, you've not done something for 6 months, chances are you're not going to be hot at it, right? Because you've not had that exposure. So that practicing really, really helps you. A ritual, on the other hand, something that's routine but is maybe more kind of symbolic, right? And it might be a ritual at the start of the day, a ritual at the end of the day. So, it might be a ritual which we all would have gone through before would be, I'm going to get in my car, I'm going to drive to work. And that signifies me starting the day at work almost, right? Because you're doing something that signifies the start of the day. It might be the end of the day as well. So how do you close your day before you then go to your personal life? Sorry, go on.
Could I pick up on what you were talking about being symbolic there with the ritual, which I thought was really interesting, but commutes symbolic? I don't know, it's ish.
So
but
think of it this way.
Genuine question, not a quibble.
Yeah, it is symbolic of switching from one thing to another. So, a lot of people have bemoaned the lack of commute because it is that ritual of I'm switching off from work. I'm maybe digesting what has taken place at work, and now I don't have to think about it. So when I get home, I'm not thinking about work. Another one that I do is to actually get changed at the end of the day. To actually, and it's not ritual undressing. It's just getting changed.
Thank you for that image. Yeah.
I knew you'd want that. But it is that ritual. Well, actually, I'm finishing work and I'm turning off. I'm now, family time, not thinking about work. So it triggers your brain to actually go, okay, we're into a different space now. So it's ritual in terms of it's not a habit. You don't do it without thinking. You actually do think about it as you do it to make sure that you are, getting to the end of the day. So it is very much you are mindful, you are there, you are doing it.
So it could be symbolic. It could be symbolic to you, which is that process of, as you say, getting changed, it active there, or it could be like, I don't know if I want to say this, but stand-up meetings that's symbolic. It gets everyone to kind of do that together because it's showing that you really should be keeping it short by standing up, and it's demonstrating to everyone else there that you are doing that as well.
You're kind of into an interesting question that Garry and I were debating whilst you were drinking beer and enjoying music at Latitude, which we're not jealous at all about, which is the difference between a ceremony and a ritual. And we had this interesting conversation, and I think Garry nailed it when he kind of said a ritual is an individual thing, a ceremony is a group of people.
Yeah.
And that would be where your agile ceremonies come into place. Yes, you're doing something, you're mindful, you're making a point that actually there is meaning to it, and that's why you do it. Whereas the ritual is much more personal and something that you tend to do on your own. So that I quite liked that kind of separation of those two words, because they are very interchangeable.
Yeah, the ritual that you mentioned is that it's that switch in mindset, so that at the end of the working day, for example, you're doing something that you always do that signifies that point in time. So in your brain, that you've shifted to a different mindset. You're like, right, I'm in chill out mode, relax now, because I need to recoup from the energy that I've lost during the day of concentrating and things, and now just kind of relax and do something that's not as maybe demanding of me, because I'm not working. But it's interesting that it may be seen as that one symbolic act, but actually it's probably a couple of things. It's not just one thing, right? So before that, you might go, well, actually, I'm just going to look at the day that I've got tomorrow coming up, and I'm just going to roughly plan that out, so I'm getting things out of my head as well at the same time, putting that in a place that I don't have to worry about it, because minds wander, right? You do that act or whatever, but you still might think about it if you've not handled it. Kev, you've made a point of sometimes going, well, I've got to do it at this point, because if I don't, I won't do it. And it's maybe because it's like hanging around, and it's like that bit of planning to go, well, actually, I can do that thing tomorrow. And actually, if I do it now, it's going to maybe take me longer, because my day's just getting longer. And I've only got so much attention and concentration that I can give in a particular
mental capacity too.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about attention, right? You can't have full attention for a whole day. It's impossible. And yet we still try and do things. It's interesting, because this kind of conversation has come about because I'm kind of trying to reset myself almost with different habits, and trying to change the times at which I do particular things, because I'm trying to do things that is maybe more demanding, and I'm just not in a situation physically or mentally to actually cope with it at that point. So I might swap things that I do in the evening to the mornings, for example. And
I think that's an interesting one, because you're obviously going to be changing your rituals and habits fairly soon, which is kind of an opportunity to look and reflect back at how you do things and where you can do things better. And I mean, whereas it's a bit harder when you're kind of pushing a change yourself to kind of build a new habit. And I know, Ali, you've talked about atomic habits, that the book before is how can you build that habit in to make it happen when you haven't got that almost trigger of something happening that may make you think of it.
And I think that's the thing. If you've got a ritual, like going through all your tasks at the start of the day and working out what you're actually going to do that day, that's a ritual. But it becomes a habit when you kind of do it every day. I was going to say religiously, but we're not going to go down that side of things. But it's what I would probably say is a habit is something where you're maybe performing that ritual at the same time every day. And if you don't do it, you kind of feel like, oh, there's something not right for today because I haven't done that. And you kind of need to go back and make sure that you actually carry out that ritual, because there is a benefit of doing it that you then feel for the whole day. So thinking about it that way, the habit is, the repetition of doing that particular ritual because of the benefit that you get. And that's how you build up those habits. And then when you're going through the day, you are using the practice to actually change habits, to enforce something, to train yourself to be more habitual in what you're actually doing. But then that practice is also
to break habits.
Oh, absolutely.
Well.
Yeah, I mean, habit is an automated process of doing something which may be good or bad, and breaking them is as difficult as creating them. Neither one is more easy, but the benefits that you get are hopefully noticeable, and I think that's that's part of where, when we look at building habits, it takes a long time to build habits. But tools that help us, I've been using To Do for years and have advocated for many years, that it's a great tool to use, but actually the habit can only be built with putting those rituals in place, practicing those rituals until you actually do them on a regular basis and go, actually, without doing that, I don't feel quite as in control, for example. And I think that's where, we've had many habits to build, many rituals to put in place or to adapt based on, not having commutes, for example.
Yeah. And it can take a long time to build up those habits. And much like reputations, they can be lost fairly quickly as well. It can become easy to stop a habit, especially one that it makes sense to you, but maybe you doesn't come naturally, and you're sort of fighting against. I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for saying this, but Garry, you used to have that kind of hour at the beginning of the day, and you said, this is my time to talk to people. This is my drop-in session. I'm going to keep this blocked out. And I know I talked to you a few months ago saying, by the way, do you still do that? And you're like, yeah, no. And that's it's easy to drop those habits.
Yeah, it's a strange thing because you can be just knocked off by anything. It could be anything that's happening, that just maybe knocks what you're building up. And it goes to the wayside, and then sometimes it can be very difficult to get back to it, and you end up going through this kind of I don't know, maybe it's kind of like dieting, it's like the fad diets. It's like, oh, I'll try another thing, and you just go round in a circle because you're not kind of, it's being able to stick at it, right? And then maybe it's that, well,
doing
actually,
something sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I've just introduced it at the wrong time. I've got the right intentions, but maybe I'm going about it in slightly the wrong way. And like a lot of things, it's like it's very personal. There's no one size fits all. We all kind of work in similar ways. We all have different routines, but it's maybe the goals are very similar, to be a bit more organized, a bit less stressed.
I don't think it has to be personal. I think there is a personal element to it, but good habits, if you've got other people doing it, like, this is why Weight Watchers, it's not just about the diet, but having that regular meeting with other people going through the same thing can help you build and break those habits as well. So yes, it may be personal, but doing it and talking about it with others can also help us as well.
I think it's really important to set expectations of others so they know how you work or how your habits, how you are trying to actually build those habits, maybe what those rituals are, so that they actually understand that time that you're putting aside for doing that particular activity is there for a reason. Focus time is great. You can book focus time in, you can have the best of intentions, but
it's focus time. That's that thing for project managers to use, isn't it?
Yeah, that's that thing that people read, and they read it as, oh, right, he's booked time in for my meeting. That's very thoughtful. Yeah. But this is where, you've got to practice defending that time, but also finding the right time that fits in with, who you're working with, depending on your role. It's, as a team, you're more likely to build habits. You're right, Kev. You're more with that reinforcement, that support, you're more likely to build habits. But, you've got to be communicating what you are trying to achieve and defending that time, and having, being able to actually say, no, this is when I'm actually sorting myself out for the day. This is the time that I can actually speak to you. But that time has to work with them.
Yeah.
No, it's not. No.
And I think trying to move it on a little bit to what the kind of things we were talking about in the show is using tools and techniques to help that makes things easier. And I think one of the biggest that's coming out at the moment is Microsoft Viva, that is really looking at that employee experience. It's looking at the ways people work and putting in place things to help with that as well.
I think certainly Viva Insights is looking at behaviours and giving us insights into what our behaviours are, giving us, turning all of the noise that we create in terms of when we have meetings, when we don't have meetings, when we're checking emails and communicating. It gives us stats that we can see and go, yeah, I could be probably more efficient if I tried to get all of those 13 meetings into one day. it gives us some information. It gives us some armory almost to actually say, I want to be more productive. This is what I'm going to do.
Some evidence, isn't it?
Yeah, evidence. Good word for it. Yeah, arsenal evidence. Yeah, depends how you use it, doesn't it? But yeah, I think and then with Viva Insights, the virtual commute, that's the change of clothes at the end of the day. Go through that, and that's it. You're switching off.
Just if you are bringing those things together, make sure and you are using Teams, don't knock the meeting button by mistake. No one needs that.
Switch the camera off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in that. So halfway through reading Deep Work by Cal Newport, and that's all about when you're working deep in something, that's when you're working at your best, right? When you're not being distracted, when you're just focused on the task. And Viva Insights has that focus time in there to help you create that that time to work deeply. But it's almost like managing yourself, right? Of like, well, am I still checking my phone whilst I'm doing that? Am I still replying to people whilst I'm in my focus time when actually I should be concentrating? And it's a whole this thing about building up your attention, and that might be just emptying your head of things that you just don't need to think about. And I think the headspace element of Viva, I think, is probably something that's maybe been undersold a little bit, because it has the tools there for mental well-being, which is a key part of when you're working all day and you've got notifications pinging off left, right and centre. You've got a million things going through your head. How can you get into a focused mindset to work on something that's important?
Absolutely.
And that headspace, everybody who has tried doing that 1 minute of breathing has found it to actually have a much bigger impact than they ever thought it would. I think pretty much everybody I know has gone, well, that's not really going to do anything, and then they use it. And I was speaking to Pete Rice.
And just quickly out, are you still doing that every day?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
So
Pete said, between meetings, do it between meetings. That 5-minute break that you put on to finish early or start late, do your 1 minute breathing in that 5 minutes, and then you'll be have switched off from the last meeting and ready for the next meeting.
It's a good idea. I have to say, I promise I won't bring Latitude up again, but they had a sort of wellness area within there, and as I walked through, they were doing some of the sort of mindfulness over on the loudspeakers, and I walked past and everyone's laying down. So it looked very odd seeing all these people laying down flat out of festival, and then sort of like suddenly lifted their hands in the air. But as I was listening to it, considering we have 4 kids with us that we're trying to march through, so it wasn't the most relaxing point. But I turned around and said to my friend, I was like, just walking through that for a couple of minutes, I actually feel more relaxed. This was quite nice. And just that sort of slow down for a minute and not having sort of music blaring out from somewhere did make a difference. And it reminded me of that breathing exercise and the fact that I know this week I've done it once out of 5, and that's not without having to look at Viva Insights. I know I've only done it once and need to start picking it up again.
That's a good example of a ritual that if you do it enough, it'll turn into a habit. So you need to practice it to get to the point where it becomes a habit, and you go, well, actually, can't start my meeting without 3 minutes breathing. Maybe you start. Tell you what, why don't you start the whole meeting with everybody doing that 1 minute of breathing, just to make sure everybody's chilled out at the start of the meeting.
Not allowed to mention names here, am I? But I like the idea. Yeah, I'm also laughing because I went over to have a look at Viva Insights to see other things I should have mind, and I've got my protect time. I've never seen this before because it says, looks like your schedule is pretty busy. We weren't able to find any time slots this week or next. So that's not really a good sign, is it? I do know because this week it's all booked out for leave. So it is booked out for good things. Just it doesn't consider it that. So, I think the other habit there that I like within Viva Insights, that we're talking about the me and how can I improve things, but one of the other things that I know I'm not very good at is saying thank you and saying well done to people. And it's got within Viva Insights the send praise to your colleagues, and you can set up a regular reminder to send some praise just at the end of weeks. Who's done a great job that week, send that thank you. I know at CPS we have a regular thing where you can nominate people for a job well done, and they can get sort of vouchers and do that very public way. But praise, what I love with it is you can do that very public acknowledgement, and there it's just kind of put it in a team or in one of the org-wide teams, or you can just send them a message. And I think it's often under acknowledged that just that simple message saying thank you, that was good stuff on there. And I think if you've got to be slightly careful because it's seen as being part of a ritual. It doesn't make quite so much impact, but making sure it's there on a regular basis and you do think and say thank you to people who've done, it's a big thing. Makes a nice difference to people.
It certainly does. I think I do find it kind of contradictory to schedule that though, for precisely that reason. It needs to have a level of value. It's I think of kids and I'm just gonna give you pocket money every week. Well, actually, no, you need to earn it. You need to, feel like it's got some value to it rather than just doing it every week. And I do think scheduling praise doesn't feel quite right. It feels like you need to remember it's there and not forget to do it occasionally, but you can't do it every week.
Yeah, you're potentially dumbing it down then. It's like it just becomes a version of a like. Doesn't it?
It'd be nice if it popped up every now and then to kind of remind you at a kind of random, arbitrary way. I do agree. Yeah, I think if it was, and that is often why I haven't done it, because it's kind of hit up at that point when I kind of get the reminder. I'm like, feeling particularly inspired to send anyone praise at the moment. You kind of need it. I know we talk about knowledge. It's the right knowledge at the right time, and it needs to be the praise, and it also needs to pop up. Maybe there is something there. Maybe there's a message that someone has done something you could interpret and say, maybe you should say well done for that. It's much like prompting the kids to say thank you. Maybe there's some more. Tell you what, there's our idea for Microsoft. They did Dynamics last time. There's the next one, having automated recommendations for praise. There we go.
Heard it first.
You can send us the check in the post, Mr. Nadella. I think there's another one. Talking of topics, I think building that habit. So maybe this leads on to a kind of final section here, which is how can we use Viva to help build these routines for an organisation as well? Because yes, the I is important, but the wider organisation and how it's all very well if an individual does that, but you want to try and encourage people to do things the right way as well. We talked a little bit earlier about the Agile stand-up meetings. How can you look at organizations that do that? If we look at what Viva Insights, the workplace analytics area looks at it, is how can you build those cross-team collaborations? And there's so much evidence, as we've seen from the Microsoft.com/work lab, that talks about the benefits of people working together and what's been lost from this remote working of losing that cross-team connectivity. So I don't know, what are your thoughts, Garry, on how we can build that organizational level habits as well?
Well, I mean, from a habits point of view, capturing knowledge is one of the key things, right? I'm sure we all scribble notes down and we all have them hidden away in our OneNotes, but actually as thinking of, well, I'm working in the context of a
Post-it notes
team,
for those
right?
not looking on video.
Yeah, you maybe wanted to be thinking about sharing that information and then sharing that how the wider team can utilize that as well. And that might be something that you found that a particular behavior in a service that you've been using for whatever reason. Almost document it. You've got topics there. You can get that published internally, get it categorized, and then if you get that habit and you start building up that catalog of little articles, things start to join together, and you start to build that little library of knowledge. But it's all got to start from those single articles, right? It's got to move from that initiative of I need to get something out of my notes into something that's a bit more readable, that then can be consumed by others in your direct team or organization.
Yes and no for that. Well, it depends. There we go.
True.
But it's I think what I like about Viva Topics is now it's easier and easier to just get it down in writing. Once you've got it down in writing, then it's a lot easier for the AI to kind of pick it up. So there is less absolute need for everything you put down to be in the right format, because the AI starts to make it easier to kind of surface those. And then when it's surfaced, you can I think there is always going to be a route where you want to curate that into valid knowledge. You want someone who's an expert to kind of say, yes, that is a good point, let me tidy that up and make that specifically more shareable. But I think building that habit of writing it down, it's got me wondering with Viva Topics, and never thought about this, is that effectively OneNote is a doc. If you're putting that into that document, then that should be useful. Now they're going to be pretty large docs, and it'd be interesting to know how well Topics would pick that up and build it within there. But there is the possibilities too.
I mean, it's quite an interesting concept, because if you think about the Agile ceremonies, you've got retrospectives. We've had team meetings for years. Combining those to actually generate some of that output, some of those lessons, some of the best practice, and then actually, so long as you've got it going into the right format where it's going to be consumed, you could be saying, well, actually, we're going to have a team meeting where we're all going to write down our favorite tip for this month or something. There's all sorts of different ways that you could kind of build that into the culture of the team, to actually, rather than leaving it to the individual on their own, to do it collectively as a team. All right, well, we're all going to put something in, so that you're actually increasing the likelihood that will become a habit that people will do on an ad hoc basis, as opposed to just in a formal sort of ceremonial basis as they have a team meeting, for example.
Absolutely. And I think Viva Insights is really nicely placed. And Al, you've done various sessions on workplace analytics. I was just, have you got any of those on YouTube? I think you have, because
I'm sure there must be some somewhere. I'd have to Google myself to find out, and I refuse to.
So we'll have a quick chat afterwards, see if we find that and add it. So if you haven't seen our YouTube channel, youtube.com/greyhatbeard, we do have a playlist on our sessions, and where they have been made available on YouTube, try to add them to there. So we'll try and get that on there. But certainly seeing that has opened up my eyes to building those habits and finding out where those things aren't there, because not only does it sort of show you where you are doing things right, or also breaking habits, which I come back to, breaking that habit of constantly being in meetings, looking at which teams are doing that. But it has that advice in there and of helping you to change the way you do things, and looking at having those things. Are people working in the evenings on there? It gives advice on recommendations to not only you yourself do that, but how can you encourage your team and support them in making sure they don't, encouraging people to switch off, encouraging people to not think about work, using things like send later in Outlook. That's something I've been trying to do more and more. Is, yes, I need to reply to someone, and if I choose to do that in my evening, which I shouldn't, but I shouldn't then distract their attention as well, is then allow that to take place and pick that up in the morning too, so they get it. I get to write it when I have time and I'm not being pulled left and right and centre, but I don't do the same thing and make the assumption about that, which I think picks up, Al, what you were saying before, of making sure people understand how you're going to work and working to the way other people work as well, making sure that people understand what the working time is and living with that. And I know we have talked a lot about the eye on there. I would ask everyone to think about the organisation and how you as a team can work together to do those things, because I genuinely think these habits will work best if everyone is doing it.
I think that's it. Getting the support from everybody else and making sure that you are managing those expectations really helps to get buy-in, but also to spread a good practice, which is equally as important.
Yeah. And I think to wrap up, we've talked, actually we haven't talked much about Viva Learning. Actually, I think it's the other one we chatted about beginning, that there is that habit of learning. I know for my team now, I have booked for the team an hour on Friday afternoon, which is their LinkedIn learning time. And I said, don't really care what you go and look at. I'd love to know, I'd love to hear about it afterwards, but you have an hour to go and make use of something in LinkedIn learning, learn something new. And that could be some new technology. but I'd even more like you to be looking at soft skills. We can think about learning about habits and routines and things on there, thinking about what it is that you can improve on, and go and use that time specifically to do that. So that's a habit we're doing, and to be able to put those into the LinkedIn Learning curated course lists and make those available to people, so you can kind of say, here's what we expect of certain roles or certain areas. Here's a load of things you can go and pick up on.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things of the practices, if you can bring learning into every day as well. And, we're not saying do 4 hours of training every day or anything like that. It might be, 20 minutes, 30 minutes as a max, but giving yourself that space to do something over the period of a week or a couple of weeks, digest things smaller, or something, as simple as, I know you want to learn a new skill, like a different way of like touch typing or something like that. It's like, just do it every day for
new language.
Or new language, exactly the same.
It's like French, not C#.
Yeah. But those kind of things. But it's that you need to think of, well, that's something that I want to learn, and the way to get better at it is to consistently train against it, rather than just, I'm going to do a intense weekend. But yeah.
Looking behind me at my guitar that's covered in dust and thinking, there's my new habit. I need to get back to that.
It's a practice.
But no, I think you're right. It's those ongoing, quick, short bursts of things, and getting that consistently as well. Yeah. Some people may be listening and going, but Kevin, there's 4 pillars of Viva Connections. You've talked a lot about insights. You've talked about topics and getting that kind of culture of knowledge sharing. You've just suddenly remembered you should have talked about Viva Learning. You haven't talked about Viva Connections. No, we haven't. So I think we will finish up there. No, joking aside, the honest answer is we will be hammering a square peg into a round hole. I love Viva Connections, very powerful at helping build connections and having people comment and share news. I don't think it's necessarily a habit, ritual or routine particularly that fits that, maybe sharing news on a regular basis, but yeah, I'm not going to hammer that in any more than that. So do go and look at Viva Connections, fantastic capabilities, just not for this. On that note, anything else, Garry? Any other habits that people should have apart from hitting subscribe to Grey Hat Beards?
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
Absolutely. So
I think there's habits. There's lots of habits that are outside of work that people should have, but I think as soon as you get into the habit of building habits and knowing how to use habits, then you'll find
and controlling.
There's so much potential in terms of how you can, do things inside of work, outside of work, get that balance, and I think that's the key thing about habits.
And I'll probably wrap up, because this is absolutely my plan. Is it's very hard when you're constantly on the go to build those habits, and if you like us are kind of coming up to summer holidays, there is your chance to stop, have a think, have a pause, and work out what habits you want. So there's your mission for the summer to all those who haven't been on holiday. If you have been on holiday, sorry, you're lost. But if you haven't, here is a good chance to go and read some good books and have a think about the habits you want. But I think we'll wrap up there. We may be back in 2 weeks. We have talked about the idea of having a break, so we're not going to promise at this stage, and I'm probably going to finish the recording and go, yeah, we've got to talk about that. So we might not be back. We might take a summer break. We've got to work out some diaries, but we are starting to look for more people and guests. So if you're listening and think you'd like to appear, please drop us a tweet, drop us a LinkedIn message. We do have a form up on the greyhatbeard.com website. If you'd like to come and be on the show and talk about something, drop us a line. We would really love to hear from you. Otherwise, thank you very much. I've been Grey.
I've been Hat.
I've been Beard.
Have a lovely summer holiday if you haven't been already. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Grey Hat Beard podcast. The song Drink Up My Mateys was brought to you by Black Bones under a non-commercial attribution license.